our third lecture of this morning. We are lucky to have Mr. Angja from India give us a talk about geopolitics in Indo-Pacific region. He is an internationally recognized journalist and commentator who has in-depth knowledge on this subject. He was associate editor of Hindu newspaper and stationed in Beijing for many years to cover India-China relations, and particularly in the strategic and the security area until fairly recently. With that, let's hear Mr. Angja's lecture.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a wonderful opportunity, and I'm very pleased to be part of this prestigious webinar. For the next few minutes, I'll be speaking on changing contours of India-China relations and their fallout in the Indo-Pacific. Well, let me begin by saying that the India-China relations have deteriorated very sharply in recent months. And in fact, I can put a date to that. If you look at the last few months, it's June 15 of this year, when there was an incident, a border clash, unarmed though, between Chinese and Indian troops in an area called Ladakh. Now, this is high in the Himalayas. And the area is, if I put it a geographic thumbnail to it, it's close to the Karakoram Pass and Leh, which is the capital of this province called Ladakh. This is part of the Tibetan Plateau, this entire area. During that clash, there were 20 Indian soldiers which were killed, and an unknown number of Chinese troops which were killed. There are various estimates. The Chinese have not given out the figures, but India has its figures, but that's not important. The point is that there was a serious clash and there were fatalities in it at a very high altitude, which caught the national attention, and in fact, international attention. And I think that's a tipping point, a turning point in India-China relationship. The reason why I say so, that prior to this incident, India was delinking the border dispute with China with economic engagement with China. So while there were frictions on the border, there's an unsettled border, yet there was this understanding that we will keep the two separate, that the border differences will not intrude into a very vibrant economic relationship which has been being built up with China over the last decade or so, if not more. But after this delinking process has been given away. And the shadow of the border conflict, especially with casualties coming into the picture, has resulted in the decoupling of the border and the economic issue. And consequently, we had economic retaliation coming against China, especially in terms of the number of apps which were very active in India, including WeChat and others, TikTok being the other big one. So these were banned along with 200 other apps, Chinese apps. And even in terms of trade, that has also been hit after this incident. And more structurally, what has happened is that there's a conscious policy decision in India to reduce dependence on China, especially this was exposed during the COVID-19 pandemic, and build new supply chains. And the partners in these supply chains are primarily countries which belong to what is called the Indo-Pacific Quad. By Indo-Pacific, I mean the vast geographic space on either side of the Malacca Straits, one on the Indian Ocean side and one in the Pacific. So it was these countries, and specifically 4 countries, which form what is called the Indo-Pacific Quad. That's India, Japan, Australia, and the United States. So the attempt after this June 15th incident is to build these new supply chains with India being given its vast potential as a manufacturing hub, being one of the primary countries which will aggregate the supply chains which are rooted, especially on September 1st, we had a meeting of the trade ministers of India, Australia, and Japan with this very idea to study this topic in much greater detail so that this reliance on China on the economic side is reduced. So that has been a major fallout of this clash which took place on the June 15th in terms of policy terms. The Indo-Pacific on the military side, I think it's become for the first time in my memory as a journalist that the friction between India and China has acquired a much broader regional dimension. In the sense, in India, we no longer are looking at our differences with China on the border in Ladakh in isolation, but are connecting it in a much broader geographic space of the Indo-Pacific, extending from India right down to South China Sea and East China Sea. So this broadening of perception is something which is new. And while you broaden this perception, you are also looking at new geopolitical partners. And that is where the Indo-Pacific Quad comes in. And as I said, the military side, there's an economic dimension to the Quad which has emerged, but there is a very strong and fundamental military dimension which is evolving as we speak. And right now, we have begun what is called the Malabar exercises, the second phase of exercises, military naval exercises. This is in the West Indian Ocean, Arabian Sea, which is the western flank of the Indian Peninsula, where we have a large exercise involved two aircraft carriers, the USS Nimitz and India's Vikramaditya, along with participants from Japan and Australia. And this is a very complex exercise because this involves carrier fleets. So you can see the scale of it, and symbolically, carriers are the ones which are there not for just defense, but for sea control. Along with them are submarines which are coming in. We are testing interoperability of these four navies. So the Indo-Pacific Quad military dimension has evolved and strengthened very strongly, and more so after the incident we have had on June 15th, in fact, from May with China along a border. And not only is this exercise a symbol of the deepening defense ties, but there has been a lot of groundwork which has been done. All the four countries bilaterally have signed what are called logistics agreements, which would allow military assets, including warships, to dock in each other's bases. So which would mean that an Indian warship can dock, let's say, in Guam, and an Australian can come into India. At the heart of the Indo-Pacific strategy is what is called the Andaman and Nicobar Islands in the Andaman Sea. That is East Bay of Bengal. And that's Indian territory. The Andaman and Nicobar Islands are strategically very, very significant. And that's because there are two specific sea lanes which I'm referring to now. One is called the 10-degree channel. This separates the Andaman group of islands with the Nicobar group of islands. And then at the end of the Nicobar Islands, we have something called a 6-degree channel. Both are very important because commercial shipping going from West Asia and beyond has to pass through these channels before it enters the Malacca Strait and then into the South China Sea. So these are critical choke points, which is part of the Indian territory. But when the Quad is meeting, I think the unsaid focus is how do we work together to ensure that there is real capability to intervene in these two channels. And that's where China comes in, because most of the Chinese commercial shipping is going to pass through through especially the 6-degree channel before it enters the Malacca Straits. So while this is Indian territory, there are certain limitations. And India can't do this if one is pushed to that level. I mean, that's extreme kind of eventuality. But I think that's a real leverage which the four countries have vis-a-vis China, in case things go offhand in the borders, where there is terrain advantage to the Chinese in most areas. I think because this picture has been broadened now, the riposte to that, the response to that, if there is pressure further built along the mountains, would be in the seas, and specifically in these two channels which I've spoken about before. So the Quad is something which is developing very fast in the wake of what in India we call Chinese expansionism. And this, I think, is only going to strengthen as the days pass. There is one more dimension I want to speak about, which is that during the Trump administration, the Quad was moving in a very clear direction. Because as I understand, and going by what, especially the June 23rd speech of Mike Pompeo at the Nixon Center, well, to me, that was, it could have been a historic speech, because during the speech, what Pompeo said was that 50 years of engagement with China has been futile from 1972. And he spoke about the real target is the collapse of the Communist Party of China. And that's Cold War to me, because that's exactly what was done to the Soviet Union when the CPSU, the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, was the target. And the collapse of the Soviet Union was something in 1990, which was as historic game changer in the global system. So from an Indian point of view, we saw in Pompeo's speech a real roadmap, in the sense there was a clear objective in the end of what is to be achieved. And that gave a lot of focus to Indian policy thinking. But now we have a rider with Biden coming in. While we may have, and this is my own view, that while we may have greater emphasis on human rights issues, and that comes to Tibet, that will come to Xinjiang, but when it comes to the Chinese mainland, to the Communist Party of China, my own view, unfortunately, is that there will be accommodation between the United States and China, where, of course, the United States will have an edge, military edge, in the West Pacific. But I do not think that the Biden administration is going to go that far as to seek the collapse of the Communist Party of China. That sort of brings in a new rider into how far we can trust the United States, because India stands in the front line of China, and our troops are facing China over there. I am not sure, and I think that could be a line of thinking in Indian policy making, that if we make the move and confront China frontally in a military way, will the United States and the Quad really come and support China, support India at that time? That's a big question mark. So that is something which is reevaluating our line of thinking. I know it's early days. We'll need to engage with the Biden administration as it unfolds. But unless we have a clear-cut answer as to the extent the United States is going to go ahead and confront China, I don't think the Quad will move as fast or in the direction, let's put it very blunt, in the containment of China, as would be the case with the Biden administration. There's plenty of skepticism over here that would be the case. So essentially, we are arraigned against the Chinese, and we are facing them on the borders, and we are not going to blink. As far as the mountains go, the Indian troops will not come down, whatever the pressure comes from the Chinese. That's something which our administration is very clear about. And so we are willing to face them. But if you look at broader geopolitics, that while we defend Indian territory, which is the duty of any government, I'm not sure as a partner of other Indo-Pacific countries, and let's say of countries of Taiwan, let's say, whether we have so far the assurance that the United States will go whole hog in support of in that direction. One last point, that Taiwan becomes extremely important for India in the building of new supply chains. I spoke about Australia, Japan, but I think the real game changer can be Taiwan. India-Taiwan relations are moving very rapidly in a positive direction. And there is a lot of buzz in Indian business circles that if we do not get access to Chinese technology, Taiwan has very real value, especially in the domain of high technology, electronics. And in fact, in real estate, in high-rise buildings, the Taiwanese have developed extremely exceptional expertise. And this would be a natural partnership, I think, which will build up in the years to come. I'll stop here and be very happy to respond to any questions there. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for that very insightful talk. You pretty much answered lots of questions our audience have. But just one quick question. You mentioned about Taiwan and India is going to develop a significant relationship with Taiwan. But China, of course, see Taiwan as the red line. If you cross that red line, they are going to retaliate against India, do whatever they can. I just wondering, as a part of the strategy, India has rejected the RCEP. Is that part of the strategy against economic dependence? Against on China, how you're going to work out relationship with Taiwan without facing the retaliation from China?
Well, in India, we follow an independent foreign policy. We are quite confident about our potential as a civilization state of the future. So our engagement with Taiwan will not be dictated by China. Though we know that the Chinese will try and exert as much pain as possible. But I think that's where the economic asymmetry between India and China, from the Indian point of view, that's where a partnership with Japan, Australia, and the United States becomes very, very important and critical factor. I do not think that India on its own will make any decision on the one China policy vis-a-vis Taiwan. It will wait because geographically it's not coming directly in the Indian Ocean zone. It will wait and see the signals which will come from the United States towards Taiwan. Now, my own hunch is that if Trump administration was there, we were moving in a direction where there was a real chance of one China policy being rejected. We already see the military relationship between the United States and Taiwan being revived big time. And there were signals to suggest that the Americans may go even further. So I think on Taiwan, while we will engage it on the economic track, on any other track, I think we'll wait and watch the response, which will come from the United States, especially. To take a call whether to go further. As far as China goes, Taiwan is very much a part of our new supply chain initiative. We are aware that it is going to cause considerable pain while we move away from China. But given a long-term perspective, the feeling is that because India is a self-contained economy in one way with a large population and domestic market, we have the capacity to bear the pain before we forge into new supply chain partnerships. So I think our engagement with Taiwan will continue, disregarding whatever be the perception from China and the way China retaliates against India.
Great. Thank you so much, sir. Because of the time limit, we have to stop us.